Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me associate myself with the Chairman's opening remarks. I thought it was a brilliant presentation that puts in perspective why we're here today. Mr. Secretary, I've already said it on the record once, and that's the only time I'm ever going to say it. No, seriously, I do respect what you said earlier. Mr. Secretary, I come in this same room and I sit down as ranking member on the Defense Committee. I listen to your explanation of how a 30% cut is not that bad, that money isn't the solution to problems, just need creative people and innovative thinking. I never hear that when we're talking about the defense budget. They always need more money, more and more and more. And yet when it comes to a world that is plagued by famine and the problems that we face, we're just saying we really don't need money to solve problems. It turns out my experience in life is you don't solve a problem by throwing money at it unless the problem is lack of money. And when it comes to the poorest people on earth, it's lack of money, lack of investments in these people and in their lives. And I take a look at some of the things that are being suggested here. I am embarrassed the policy of this country now when it comes to accepting refugees in the world. Since World War II, we've led the world in accepting refugees from all over Cuba. 3 of our 4 Hispanic senators are from Cuban refugee families. I mean, you go through all of the people that we've absorbed as refugees into this country, and we know the policy of the Trump administration opposes acceptance of refugees. Thank goodness there are heroes in this world like the King of Jordan. Currently, Jordan has absorbed 3 or 4 million refugees in a nation of 7 million people. It is an incredible act of kindness and charity on their part and bravery when you consider the political risk. So what does this budget do to Jordan? This budget cuts by 18% migration and refugee assistance to countries like Jordan. We're not accepting refugees, and we're saying to the countries that are, we're going to cut your funding. Think of a more creative way to feed those refugees, 1.4 million Syrian refugees. It just doesn't work, Mr. Secretary, for us to walk away from our global responsibility and then to hurt those who are accepting much more than others. How would you respond to the King of Jordan and explain why we would cut funds to him at this moment in history?
Well, I would take exception to the comment that we're walking away from our responsibilities in that region with all of the men and women in uniform we have fighting and the State Department diplomatic resources we have to get at the reason the refugees are in Jordan. And I would tell you, in working with the region, they all understand. Turkey, Jordan, others understand. We'd like the refugees to stay close to their homes so they can go back. Having them come all the way to the United States may not achieve that. So our approach on the significant problem of refugee migration locally is to solve the problem that allows people to go home. We have already seen some success in the liberation of Mosul and other cities. We hope to replicate that kind of success in Syria, where we have come behind the military quickly when they liberate an area, create a secure zone, restore power and water, restore hospitals, restore schools. We have close to 40,000 children back in school in East Mosul already. People will come back if we create the conditions. So we really want refugees to return. It's not the objective to have Jordan have to house those refugees now and forevermore.
Of course it's not, Mr. Secretary, but thank goodness for the King of Jordan, and I hope you feel that way about him too.
I certainly
While
do.
we're trying to solve the problem in Syria, and I know Americans are risking their lives in that effort, while we're trying to solve that, this man is trying to make sure that the people, the Syrian refugees, have something to eat, to make sure that they have a place. He told me their biggest problem is water. They don't have enough water to accommodate all these refugees, and we're going to cut the funding? Let me tell you another situation, which I'm sure you're aware of. As you go into the poorest places on earth, what you find, sadly, is a gross mistreatment of little girls and women. It happens over and over again. And so a fellow by the name of George McGovern, who used to sit in this body and was a great leader in our nation before he passed, came up with an idea. He came up with an idea of a school lunch program. And you know who joined him in that idea? Bob Dole. An old alliance and partnership was revived. And here's the idea they had. If we offer a free lunch to kids in the poorest places on earth, we think parents will send their little girls to school. Just basic. That's what they did. The McGovern-Dole school feeding program. And then to add another element to it, they gave the kids a little bag of grain to take home from school So the parents couldn't wait to get the little girl off to school. What's the difference in the poorest places in the world between an educated and an uneducated little girl? I can tell you what it is. The uneducated little girl will be a slave, probably married off at an early age, probably bearing children long before she should, and maybe those children will survive and maybe they won't, and then we'll have overpopulation problems. But if they finish school, the opposite is the case. And so what did your budget decide to do to this McGovern-Dole school feeding program? You eliminated it. Now, is that going to make for a better world and a safer world?
Senator, what we are attempting to do is to marshal forces of others. We are talking to other countries and asking them to do more, to step in to fill in some of the needs that Jordan has in the refugee camps, same in Turkey. So we are using our convening authority to bring to bear other resources as well. These are some of the very difficult choices we made in achieving a budget level that we have put forth in this budget. None of these choices are easy, none of them. There's not a one of them that was not difficult to make. And so I do not take exception to anything you've said and at all, and would agree. So what we are going to attempt to do is see if we can bring other resources to bear to either fill in, mitigate, or perhaps grow out interest of others to address these same issues.
So our message to the world is we're stepping back. America's first in stepping back now. We're stepping back by 30% in our expenditures. We're eliminating these programs, and you are welcome to fill in to the rest of the world. That is our message, the America First message.
Our message is we're leaning in and asking all of you to step up and do more.
I think we're leaning on. We're not leaning in, and we're leaning on the poorest people on earth.